The grand chamber of the celestial assembly gleamed with the splendor of countless civilizations. The colossal dome above shimmered with an artificial aurora, its hues shifting in harmony with the assembly's discussions. Delegates from over 50 species occupied the amphitheater, their voices clashing like an orchestra out of tune. At the center of the hall, a holographic display projected a ravaged planet, its surface scarred by craters and infernos. The Vorkash swarm had struck once more. "We cannot withstand another cycle of this," growled High Speaker Ralvek of the Tauren, his deep voice vibrating through the chamber. The massive ox-like being slammed a heavy fist onto the stone table. "Every system they touch is reduced to embers. Yet here we sit, debating endlessly." The slender, avian-like figure of Ambassador Selene of the Veyari fluttered his iridescent wings in frustration. "And what do you suggest, Ralvek? We've hurled fleets at the Vorkash before, and they've shredded them like carrion. Reinforcements from the Solari species are non-existent. They are pacifists, unfit for war." The mention of humans sparked murmurs of disdain among the gathered representatives. For decades, humanity had remained an enigma, technologically superior and fiercely inventive, yet unwilling to engage in the Assembly's military campaigns. When Earth had joined the Assembly, many expected them to be formidable allies. Instead, they sent diplomats and peacekeepers offering negotiations rather than soldiers. "I agree with Silent," hissed Zeril, a serpentine delegate from the Sauran Dominion. "Humans pride themselves on their diplomacy. When the Vorkash reach them, they will try to talk their way out of extinction." A single voice cut through the consensus. "Perhaps," said Lyra, a feline-like Myron with piercing amber eyes. "We have misjudged them. Their history speaks of relentless survival. They rose from their own dying world, nearly destroying it in the process. Does that not suggest they are capable of war?" Silence followed. Then Ralvek snorted. "Capable, perhaps, but they have no stomach for it. We need warriors, not scribes." The hologram shifted, now showing a live feed from a distant sector. A colony world ablaze, Vorkash dreadnoughts looming like carrion birds. The horror on the screen was undeniable. Finally, the Assembly's prime facilitator, Solus, an enigmatic translucent being, spoke. Its voice carried like whispers on the wind. "Humanity's reluctance to engage in our wars has indeed been vexing, but desperate times demand desperate measures. We will ask the Solari one last time for aid. If they refuse, we may face annihilation." Days later, emissaries arrived on Earth, their sleek vessels descending upon the United Nations. Headquarters in Geneva. Unlike the grandeur of the Assembly's halls, the humans greeted them in a stark, functional chamber. At the center of the human delegation stood Ambassador Elena Navarro, a composed woman with sharp features and keen eyes. She listened as the Assembly's representatives made their plea. When they finished, she leaned forward, her expression unreadable. "You've come to us because you have no other choice," she said evenly. "You assumed we feared war, that we lacked the will to fight." Silent bristled. "Is that not accurate? You have contributed nothing to the Assembly's military efforts. We had no choice but to assume." Navarro raised a hand, silencing him. "You assumed wrong." She stood, her posture commanding. "Humanity does not fear war. We simply do not glorify it. But when war comes to us, when survival demands it, there is no force in the galaxy that fights harder or smarter than we do." A heavy silence filled the room. Navarro pressed a button, and a hologram flickered to life, displaying a strategic map of the Vorkash advance. "If we intervene," she continued, "we do so on our terms, and you will meet the ones who will lead the charge." The following day, the emissaries were escorted to a classified military installation deep in the Nevada desert. Rows of advanced aircraft and mechanized infantry lined the facility, squads of soldiers moving with practiced precision. The air was thick with purpose. At the heart of it all stood Captain Marcus Hale of the United Earth Marines. Broad-shouldered and confident, he greeted the emissaries with a firm handshake, one that left some of them wincing. "So," he said, voice steady, "you want to see how humans wage war?" Silent eyed him skeptically. "You against the Vorkash? They'll tear you apart." Hale smirked. "We've heard that before. Didn't end well for the other guy." In a nearby briefing room, a massive tactical display outlined their battle plan. An audacious mix of precision strikes, adaptive warfare, and sheer unpredictability. As Hale explained the strategy, Lyra of the Mirren watched in fascination. She noticed how easily the humans spoke of risk and sacrifice, as though they had long made peace with the cost of war. As the briefing ended, Hale turned to the delegation. "You came to us because you're desperate," he said. "We'll help. But understand this, we don't fight for conquest. We fight to end wars, not prolong them. If we step in, it's because we refuse to let monsters like the Vorkash run unchecked." For the first time, Lyra saw humans not as pacifists, but as something far more dangerous. Silence swallowed hard. "Perhaps we were wrong about you." Hale's smirk returned. "You're about to find out. The Vorkash Armada descended upon Andari IV, a besieged colony world on the brink of destruction. Their warships, jagged, organic monstrosities, hovered like predatory beasts, while swarms of insectoid ground troops ravaged the cities below. Above them, a sleek black warship cut through the void, the UESS Revenant. From its underbelly, dropships launched in tight formation, engines howling as they tore through the atmosphere. Inside one of them, Captain Hale checked his gear with quiet precision. His Marines, 24 soldiers clad in advanced exosuits, sat in disciplined silence, their faces grim but unwavering. "You've all seen the reports." Hale's voice cut through the hum of the engines. "The Vorkash think they own this battlefield. Let's remind them why picking a fight with humans is a bad idea." A ripple of quiet chuckles passed through the squad, but their discipline never wavered. They were Earth's sharpest blade, honed through centuries of war. When the dropships landed, the Marines moved with terrifying efficiency. Their railguns and precision drones shredded the Vorkash swarm, cutting through them like a scythe through wheat. Unlike the chaotic battle strategies of the Assembly's forces, the Marines fought with surgical precision, adapting to every shift in the enemy's tactics. Even Lyra, watching from the command post, was stunned. She turned to Sergeant Vega, a sharp-eyed Marine barking orders as she tore through enemy ranks. You're enjoying this?" Lyra asked in disbelief. Vega laughed, launching a grenade. "Hell no, but I got 50 credits riding on Captain Hale breaking the kill streak record." Lyra stared, unable to comprehend their mix of deadly focus and dark humor. By the time the battle ended, the Vorkash had been driven back. The Assembly's soldiers, inspired by the Marines, rallied behind them. Back at the Assembly chambers, Solus received the war report. After a long pause, the Prime Facilitator spoke. "Humanity has shown us their true nature. They are not warriors. They are protectors, unyielding, fearless, and bound by something the Vorkash will never understand." For the first time, the galaxy had a shield, and the Vorkash would learn to fear it. The Battle of Andari IV had shifted the war's momentum, but the Vorkash swarm was far from defeated. Across the sector, their forces regrouped, adapting to the human threat with unsettling speed. In the dark reaches of space, their dreadnoughts gathered like storm clouds, preparing for a retaliation unlike any the Assembly had ever faced. Aboard the UESS Revenant, Captain Marcus Hale stood in the war room, his gaze fixed on a glowing strategic display. The Vorkosh fleet had tripled in size since their last engagement, their movements eerily synchronized. If they weren't stopped here, entire sectors would burn. "This isn't just a counterattack," Ambassador Navarro muttered, arms crossed. "They see us as a threat now." "Good," Hale replied, his tone like sharpened steel. "That means they're finally taking us seriously." From the corner of the room, Lyra of the Mirren watched in silence. After witnessing the battle firsthand, she no longer doubted humanity's capabilities, but something about them still unsettled her. They weren't just skilled fighters, they were something else. They were relentless. The Assembly's forces had spent years fighting the Vorkosh in desperation. Humans, on the other hand, fought with something terrifying, the cold certainty of victory. Days later, alarms blared across the Celestial Assembly's stronghold world, Akaris Prime. From the upper atmosphere, Vorkosh warships descended in unison, their organic hulls writhing like living things. Swarms of fighters poured into the sky, and on the ground, massive troop carriers unleashed legions of chitinous, razor-limbed warriors. For the first time in history, the Assembly's capital was under direct attack. Panic spread through the city's towering spires as defense forces scrambled to mount a resistance. But the Vorkosh were different this time. They moved strategically, targeting command centers, planetary shields, and supply depots with eerie precision. "They're adapting," Navarro whispered, watching the battlefield unfold from orbit. Hale's jaw tightened. "Then we hit them harder." The UESS Revenant surged into action, leading a fleet of human warships into battle. As the Vorkosh fleet closed in, human forces deployed en masse. Marines in exosuits, fighter squadrons darting through enemy lines, and orbital artillery raining fire on the invaders. In the chaos, Lyra found herself on the front lines. She hadn't planned to be there, but the sight of the Vorkosh overwhelming her people ignited something in her. These humans, these warriors, had chosen to stand and fight. Could she do any less? Gripping her weapon, she fell into step with Sergeant Vega, who flashed a bloody grin. "Welcome to the party, Kitty," Vega said, cocking her rifle. "Try not to die." Lyra exhaled sharply. This was madness, but she wasn't running. She was fighting. As the battle raged, the Vorkosh unleashed their final weapon, a Titan-class warship, larger than anything the Assembly had ever seen. Its shadow stretched across the battlefield, its cannons powerful, enough to level entire cities. Hale's voice came over the comms, calm but resolute. "Alpha Squad, you're with me. We're taking that thing down." Vega let out a low whistle. "Hell of a way to die, sir." Hale smirked. "Then don't. Die!" The Marines launched their assault, using jetpacks and drop pods to breach the colossal warship's hull. Within its dark corridors, the Vorkosh awaited them. The fighting was brutal. Blade against rifle, talon against steel. But the Marines did not stop. Step by step, they carved their way to the ship's core. Finally, Hale reached the control. Nexus, a pulsating mass of alien technology. He placed the last of their detonators on the ship's reactor. "Charges set," he called out. "Everyone clear out. Now." As the Marines evacuated, the warship trembled. The explosion ripped through its core, tearing the monstrous vessel apart from the inside. In the sky above Akaris Prime, the Vorkosh flagship erupted into fire and debris. On the ground, the invading forces hesitated, their command structure shattered, and in that moment, the Celestial Assembly launched its final counteroffensive. When the smoke cleared, Akaris Prime still stood. The Vorkosh had been defeated. In the aftermath, Lyra found herself standing beside Hale, gazing at the battlefield. "You turned the tide of an entire war," she murmured. "I didn't think it was possible." Hale removed his helmet, his face lined with exhaustion. "It wasn't just us," he said. "We just reminded you what was possible." As the Assembly's forces began to rebuild, a transmission came from the remnants of the Vorkosh fleet. It was not a surrender. It was a warning. More were coming. And this time, they would bring everything. Back at the Assembly's council chamber, Prime Facilitator Solus watched the war reports in silence. Then, in a voice that echoed across the hall, it spoke. The war is not over, but for the first time in history, the galaxy has found its defenders. Solus looked toward the human delegation, and its final words sent a chill through the chamber. Let us see if the Vorkosh are ready for them.